afternoons here on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as my panel and I take on some of the top stories hitting the headlines.
You can look up the statistics.
No, you look it up. I hug everyone. We learn from it and try and move on. That's it. Opinion is at the heart of the show. It's a place for open and frank conversation, but without the fear of cancellation. So join me here on GB News on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons between 4 and 6 p.m.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co, the show where we'll be getting into the topics that have got you talking. Today, of course, is Armistice Day, or Remembrance Day, some people call it. I wonder, do you think that we do enough to mark the occasion? And Furlough, a lifeline for many, but for others an opportunity to defraud the system. And who'll be picking up that bill? Us, of course, the taxpayers. Do you think the government did enough to make sure the schemes were not open to abuse? And is there any such thing as a free lunch? According to one school head teacher, no. He spiked outrage today by telling his students that if they've got even about a penny of outstanding balance on their school lunch account, they won't be getting any food until it's cleared. Do you agree with him? And should employers be able to use algorithms to track their workers and set them targets? A group of MPs are now saying this is bad for employees' mental health and are proposing a new Algorithms Act to make sure the technology puts people first. Are they right? We'll have all that and more, but coming up, first, the news headlines.
Your GB News headlines. Millions of people have observed a 2-minute silence today to remember the men and women who lost their lives in conflict. Marked each year on the 11th hour of the 11th day and the 11th month, people across the UK pause to honour those who died in conflict. Well, it's been confirmed the Queen will attend Remembrance Day this coming Sunday. The service will be at the Cenotaph, of course, as usual. Now, in other news today, Border Force officers have intercepted at least 25 migrant boats attempting to cross the Channel today, each carrying 50 people on board. It's been reported that 4 small boats have also made it to shore, landing on Deal Beach in Kent. There's been an influx of migrants trying to reach the UK in recent days, with 1,200 crossing the English Channel in the last 48 hours. Yorkshire County Cricket Club has confirmed that the chief executive, Mark Arthur, has resigned. It follows a report that found the former Yorkshire player, Azim Rafiq, was a victim of racial harassment and bullying. The club's board say they're now looking for new leadership that will be vital, driving the change they need. A former Labour leader says we need to salvage what we can now from COP26. Shadow Secretary of State.
I think the challenge is the science, and the science tells us we've got to halve emissions this decade by 2030, and frankly, not enough countries have stepped up to do what they needed to do. And the scientists tell us we're about a fifth of the way there, which is just not nearly far enough.
As I was saying, the Shadow Secretary of State for Business, Ed Miliband, saying there the reality is the conference will not deliver everything that's hoped for. In other news, tens of thousands of care home staff in England are facing job losses as COVID vaccinations for carers becomes a legal requirement from today. Staff must be double jabbed to work unless they're medically exempt. It's estimated more than 50,000 current workers haven't received both doses, although nearly half have received a single jab. The move comes as the sector faces severe shortages, with some quitting in advance due to the new policy. Speaking to GB News, the Shadow Minister for Public Health and Patient Safety said Labour had warned the government not to make this move.
We said to the government we didn't think this was a wise thing to do. We encouraged the government to use the time, because this was voted on a number of months ago before the summer, to use the time to engage with trade unions, to engage with professional bodies. They haven't done that, and I'm really worried about the impact that that's going to have on social care and then again on the NHS. But once again, it shows at the very heart of government a lack of strategic planning here, understanding of the real world, and it's all our communities that are going to suffer from that.
Rotherham Council has introduced new plans to combat child sexual exploitation. It follows criticism from opposition Conservatives who said not enough was being done to tackle child grooming in the borough, which the council and South Yorkshire Police dispute. The 2014 J report revealed that 1,500 children had been abused in the town between 1997 and 2013. One survivor we're calling Elizabeth told GB News she hopes Rotherham can recover.
Hoping that there's improvements, and there will be, but because they've been amended, I feel like they've been watered down a little bit more. I hope that Rotherham can make a stand, and I hope Rotherham can heal. Am I 100% sure that's going to happen? No.
In sports, Steven Gerrard says Aston Villa's ambitions plans were a factor in him agreeing to become the club's new head coach. The former Liverpool and England captain has left Rangers, who he guided to the Scottish Premiership title, undefeated last season. Gerrard replaces Dean Smith, who was sacked by Villa on Sunday. And just in time for Christmas, the latest biodegradable and sustainable product is now available. It's glitter, and ahead of the festive season, researchers from Cambridge University have found a way to make non-toxic vegan glitter from the cell walls of plants. Glitter apparently isn't currently environmentally friendly, it's toxic, and it contributes to plastic pollution. That's all from me. I'm back in an hour.
Thanks for that, Polly. I swear I'm getting soft in my old age, because I was listening to that story there about vegan glitter. I was thinking, yeah, that actually sounds good. I'm going to look into that. What's happening to me? Anyway, joining me on the show tonight until 7 o'clock, my panel, Miata Fambulla, the Chief Executive of the New Economics Foundation, Ellie Mayo-Hagan, Director of the Centre for Labour and Social Studies, and Benedict Spence, commentator and journalist. Good evening to all of you. And also, you know the drill by now, don't you? If it matters to you, it matters to me. I want you to get in touch and let me know what you're talking about tonight, what's on your mind, and all your responses, of course, to the topics that we're talking about tonight. You can email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at GBNews. Is there anything that you think that we should be talking about today that we're not? If you're going to email me and say, Tory sleaze, I'll be honest, I feel, is there much more to say about this? I think we're on day something like 13, day 14 on this story, and I think it's going to rumble on and on. So tonight, if you don't mind, I've swerved that one. But today, of course, let's move on. We've all come together, haven't we, for Armistice Day? And some people, of course, call it Remembrance Day, whatever you call it. We've all been back together a year after ceremonies were disrupted, of course, by the pandemic. Without the restrictions in place, people have gathered at the cenotaphs around the nation to commemorate those who have died in military conflicts. A 2-minute silence is held, of course, every year on the 11th of November at 11 a.m. to mark the end of World War I in 1918. The silence is held at 11 because the end of the hostilities between Germany and the Allies was declared on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. The traditional symbol of remembrance, of course, is the poppy. Managed to get mine on today. I got a lot of people last night saying, "Where's your poppy, Michelle?" This is going to sound really lame. I lost my pin last night, but I found it tonight. Benedict, your thoughts on Remembrance Day, Armistice Day? Do you think, as a country, we do enough? I know in some countries, today is actually a national holiday, bank holiday. It's not here.
I think actually we strike quite a good balance, if I'm going to be honest with you. I know that this is quite a touchy subject. People talk about, the symbolism of the poppy and, Britain's imperial past and what we learn in schools. Actually, I think you look at some nations are very quick to actually try to forget all of their military history for good reasons and bad, and others glorify in it. And I don't think you want to be either of those sort of countries. So I think when you meet in the middle, as we do, we have this day. It's very sombre. It's you wouldn't really want to call it a celebration of the lives of the soldiers who died at all. It is simply about remembrance, and it is about reflecting whether or not the conflicts were good or bad is slightly beside the point. It is about the sacrifice that people made. I think actually that is the best approach to take. I think it's very dignified the way that we handle it. You wouldn't want it to be like we see in some nations where you have sort of vast military parades and fireworks and, missiles on trucks and stuff going down, through the centre of their cities. And as I say, other countries they don't want to talk about it at all. And I think a country, certainly with our history, would be remiss if we were to go down that route. So, it might sound a little bit...
Do you think it should be a bank holiday here?
I don't think it should be a bank holiday, no. I think actually... I think the important thing is actually stopping what you're doing in your day, be it work, be it school, whatever it is, and taking those 2 minutes to just reflect. I don't think you need to take the whole day to reflect on these. It is simply that little bit of remembering for those few minutes and then moving on, having had that brief pause. And I really do think actually that we get it right in this country.
Ellie, what's your view?
Well, my granddad was a prisoner of war and in Second World War, and my husband's a Navy veteran, and my brother-in-law is a squaddie, so I sort of feel quite connected to sort of veterans and people in the military. But I like to spend Remembrance Day, I like to take my 2 minutes and think about my great-granddad who was... he was gassed in the trenches in World War I, and he was really, like many young working-class men, he was sort of sent there really without much of a choice. He came home traumatised, and then he couldn't find a job, and he had to busk playing the trumpet because not many people would employ veterans because they were worried that they were mentally unstable after what had happened to them in the war. And then he joined a trade union and sort of got involved in politics, and actually through that changed the world as millions of working class people across the world did by building the welfare state and then eventually the NHS after the Second World War, which we're all incredibly thankful for. So for me, what I reflect on in Remembrance Day is about how we need to do better for people that we send to other countries to fight and die, and how we don't support veterans enough. We need to do more to support those with PTSD. We need to make sure that once people leave the military that they have good jobs and that they're cared for, and I don't feel that happens at the moment. So I'd like remembrance to be something genuine and sincere.
Something meaningful as opposed to just a word and a name. And I've got to say, Miata, Ellie's got a really good point, because I know when I think, for example, about remembrance, and we all walk around with our poppies, we all talk about how we respect the people that have sacrificed their life. And then you also notice how many veterans are homeless, for example. And the two, for me, really don't correlate. So what's your view?
No, I completely agree with that. I think there isn't enough of a duty of care for people who leave the military. And, you know, for me, so I think it's important that we remember, but I think we have to do more than just remember, because otherwise it feels quite tokenistic. And I think, you know, I think it's right. You know, my son bought a poppy. He's only 7. They're selling it in school, and they get to learn what it's about, and they get that moment where they reflect and remember, which I think is really important. But you know, I don't actually think we do enough to remember the horror of war in a way that means that we never go back there again. You know, I think the First World War, the Second World War feels like another lifetime for a lot of people. And so when I see us trashing institutions that have kept the peace for, you know, decades across Europe, across globally, whether it's the European Union, the United Nations, it worries me because I don't think we'll remember just how horrific it was that people who were not trained were sent to the trenches, were sent, you know, to the front line of conflict. And, you know, a whole generation was traumatized by that. And I think that's the thing, we've got to remember that so we don't slip back into things that could lead to those sorts of conflict ever again.
Yeah, someone just got in touch as well saying, I'm a veteran and I now feel, this is coming anonymously, but I'm a veteran and I now feel improving attitudes to serving military personnel and veterans, but the governments past and present need to do more for our military with better standards of living for serving personnel as well as not just the veterans. And I think that's right. And to your point, I've got a little baby who's 1 and I was really touched a couple of days ago actually. He came out of nursery with a poppy and it actually meant a lot to me, and I was really pleased that my little boy was kind of learning, well, I mean, I use the term learning loosely, right? He was just scribbling with a bit of paint, but you know what I mean. It meant a lot to me, actually, that he'd come home with this little poppy that he'd made. Rax has got in touch on Twitter saying we should absolutely acknowledge our glorious dead, he says, from wars. They are heroes who gave their tomorrow for our today. How dare anyone say we shouldn't celebrate Remembrance Day? I don't think anyone would suggest, certainly, I mean, no one on here is suggesting that we shouldn't. In fact, actually, I would probably be suggesting a bank holiday. I think that's one of the things that I would be contemplating. Maybe we could do more, was the point that I was making today. But anyway, get in touch, let me know your thoughts. You can email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at Michelle Dewbs. Now, I'm going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be talking about lots of things, Furlough and fraud, and that great story. I think it's a great story. It's got people furious today. The headmaster that said that basically if the students have a penny of debt on their lunch account, no more food for them until it's paid back. What do you think to that? We'll have that and more coming up after the break.
On Brazier at 8, why the Tories will live to regret criticising opposition MPs for having a good drink on a flight to Gibraltar. Also, first came the Ottomans, then came the Soviets, while we can't understand how the Polish feel about an invasion from the east. And aggro in the aisles, the supermarket shopper told to show less flesh or leave. That's Brazier from 8.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. To Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back. Now, Kevin has been in touch on the email saying, Michelle, I think anyone who wears a poppy right now but has supported vaccine passports, etc., is a hypocrite. He goes on to say, my granddad, who was my hero, was a prisoner of war for 4 years in Italy during World War II. And he fought for mine, yours and everyone on this panel and beyond. Freedoms, he says, that have been stripped away during this pandemic. Kevin goes on to say, anyone advocating lockdowns, vaccine passports and a two-tier society should get that poppies off their chest. They're not worthy of wearing one, he says. He goes on to say, please read my email out, Michelle, because no one ever reads out my emails. Well, there you go, Kevin. I read that out for you. And I've got to say, this whole vaccine passport conversation, I mean, it's dominating the news again today, isn't it? Because of the care workers. And of course, it's happened today. Conversation that we've had over and over. And, you know, those kind of things will never get any support from me. But a lot of people, however, do support them. Hence, I guess, your point. Anyway, let's move on. A report today says hundreds of firms set up after the furlough scheme was established have claimed up to £26.6 million. HMRC are now investigating whether the money was obtained fraudulently, and in fact the tax authorities have been ordered to recover a total of £1 billion. Furlough costs, just as a reminder, have cost us, it says the government, but it's not the government, it's you and I, the taxpayers, almost £70 billion. I wonder, was the scheme too easy to exploit? Your thoughts?
Well, I think in the government's defence, they set the scheme up pretty quickly in response to a pandemic and an economic emergency. And inevitably, you're going to get people that try and game the system. You're going to get people that try and defraud the system. And they've got to try and think about how they claw back. But for me, that does not negate the power of the system. And without furlough, without the government choosing to intervene in order to help people to prop up wages, we would be facing an absolute economic catastrophe now. So if I think about the balance of some people frauding the system, and by the way, they're always going to find ways to fraud the system, and you just have to clamp down on that, versus the benefits to our country and society of the furlough scheme, it's an absolute no-brainer. So they can fix it after the event, but I wouldn't change that scheme because it provided support when people needed it.
And this task force, to give its correct name, the Taxpayer Protection Task Force, this has been tasked with trying to recover this. Do you think it will?
Eventually, but very slowly, which is the way of HMRC. You know, they can and they have, and we see it all the time, find ways in which they can kind of claw back and clamp down on fraud. But I generally hope that the mechanisms they put in place to deal with this are mechanisms that they put in place across the piece, because I think there are too many people that game the system and to the detriment of everyone, whether it's avoiding to pay tax or whether it's trying to get, you know, use loopholes to kind of gain more from the state when we should be investing in people that really need help.
Ali, your thoughts?
I mean, I think that I agree with what Miata is saying about, you know, we just needed to get money to people because the entire country shut down. I was interviewing businesses around in March 2020 for a piece that I wrote, and, you know, businesses lost all of their income like that. And it just dried up. And that was even before there were really news stories about that. So we just had to get money to people. I think the whole economy would have collapsed if we didn't have furlough. So I think that's the main aim, and I think that it's really good that that happened. And I think when you do something quickly and you just need to get it out there, obviously some people are going to take advantage of it. There's going to be things that you've missed and people are going to take advantage of that. I think what I find frustrating about this is that £26 million is nowhere near as much as £35 billion, which is the amount that's lost in tax avoidance every year. And I just really want to know, where is the tax office's task force to reclaim all of that money that is taken away from us and siphoned off into tax havens around the world, so we can't use that money to support our public services? You know, it just frustrates me because it shows that clearly HMRC is capable of going after money that has been taken away from it illegally or just unethically. And yet it's not doing that for the real big offenders, which are the sort of the billionaire tax avoidance schemes, and that's just a bit frustrating for me.
Yeah, just to put some context onto this, by the way, the 26 or so million that we're talking about now, this is part of a bigger fraud. So there's estimates that £5.56 billion of taxpayers' money from the assistance scheme more broadly. So you've got your Furlough, you've got your Help Out to Eat Out, or whatever it was called. So yeah, that is part of a much bigger pie. By the way, tax avoidance is legal. Defrauding a system in this way is absolutely not. Benedict, your thoughts?
The thing that concerns me about all of this is because so much money was sort of spent on people, essentially businesses being hooked up to IV drips of money because they didn't really have any choice. What we've already seen with subsequent budgets that have come is tax increases. And the problem that I foresee is that those tax raises are going to carry on coming as HMRC pursues lots of businesses and individuals to try to claw back money that may have been obtained fraudulently, might not. There might have been some loophole. There might not have been an I dotted or a T crossed. And the thing that I worry about is that you will see HMRC becoming a lot more aggressive going after people who haven't necessarily broken the law, but that they might have done, or they might have been in violation of some issue or other. And that what you will see is businesses that are already struggling as they are, because, the economic recovery, as we see, is not particularly healthy at the moment. This is the absolute worst moment for businesses to have money taken out of their pockets. But you will see HMRC going after people, you will see sort of investigations being opened, and it's not going to create an environment that is particularly conducive to an economic recovery. And it will add the burdens, the stresses to lots of people who are already struggling a lot, simply because there will be demands made of HMRC. You have to go out and get X amount of money back. It's not going to be well, let's find out how much money was taken fraudulently. It will be, well, we've spent this amount of money, try and get this amount back, and do it by whatever.
Incentives.
Not necessarily, because you will see lots of businesses struggling to meet the demands of HMRC. And you have it even when there aren't pandemics. People end up being overcharged by HMRC, and then they get sort of repaid a year or two later. But for a lot of businesses, it might be too late by that point. People might have already been evicted from their houses by that point.
Yeah, and tax
That's the issue that I have, which is that you have a system that is desperate to claw back as much money as it can, and innocent people who haven't done anything wrong are going to get caught up along the way.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned innocent people, but just to give you some examples, there's been lots of stories, hasn't there, of organisations that have apparently put their staff on furlough, been claiming the furlough from the government, but yet been forcing their staff to carry on working. So there's that example. There's an example here of a restaurant that had one employee eligible anyway, which was the director, who was going on to claim for several what they're now discovered to be off-the-book employees. At the same time, he was a restaurant owner, so at the same time, he was claiming that his restaurant was closed and that therefore all of his staff was furloughed, but then started signing up as well to the Help Out to Eat Out or Eat Out to Help Out scheme at the same time. So there really were some blatant kind of fraudulent activity. And what I think to this is shame on you, actually, because I know, Miata, you mentioned that wherever there's systems, people do look to defraud it. But, if you're somebody that in the midst of this, people are dying, people are frantically trying to keep their livelihoods, and if you're kind of sitting there thinking, how can I make money off this? How can I kind of siphon out and defraud? Then I actually genuinely do think shame on you, because to sit and to do that in this occasion, I just think it's all kind of shades of wrong, I've got to say. Anyway, you guys have been getting in touch. Lots of you pretty much disagree with me on the bank holiday. Today, Susan says no, we should not have a bank holiday today. Those who died didn't have the chance to enjoy any bank holiday. Paul on the email says, regarding a bank holiday on Armistice Day, I think the 2-minute silence reflects better rather than having the whole day off. He goes on to say having a whole day off would just be an excuse for the majority of people to have a day off work and not give a thought to the soldiers and military personnel that have died in the wars. Fair enough. Leighton says, no, Michelle, we shouldn't have a bank holiday because it will become exactly that, just a holiday, meaning nothing else. As we do it now, we should stop what you're doing wherever you are, reflect and remember. I wonder, by the way, did you do your minute silence today, your 2-minute silence? Where was you? Was you out and about? And if you were out and about, did people around you observe it? I think sometimes if you're at a train station or somewhere like that, it's quite easy because the announcement comes on. But if you're just getting about your business, did you remember today, and what did the people around you do? On Furlough, Janet says, Michelle, my son was one of the 3 million self-employed people who got nothing. It was a disgrace when too many were paid large loans to stay at home and worked all the way through. She goes on, and I have to say, I agree with you, Janet, there was some big failings, wasn't there, in terms of self-employed people, and also people that just got employment as well, that were brand new into their roles as well. They really struggled. Lee says, I've had to live entirely on my hard-earned savings throughout lockdown and beyond. I didn't receive a penny. And he goes on to say the lockdown has cost him £10,000 to feed himself and pay his bills. He thinks the system was outrageous. Patrick says, I don't agree with Furlough because lockdowns don't work and future generations will still be paying. I know someone who did a second job, he goes on to say, when being furloughed, but he's not a grass. He says, so he won't be telling the authorities.
You've got to respect that.
Well, there you go, yes. Anyway, let's move on. What am I going to move on to? Oh, yes, I love this next story. It's really divided opinions. Pupils, this is all about a school in Wales. The head teacher there, he's fed up. Basically, what he's saying is there's an arrears. It's just shy of £2,000 worth of outstanding balance on these students' meal accounts, and he's had enough of it. Neil Furden, he's called, he's written to the parents basically saying, if you don't clear these debts, he's told the school cook not to give any food to pupils. And it's really sparked division, this one has. The school has given the parents/pupils a deadline of the 19th of November. By a bizarre twist of fate, I have to say this wasn't pre-planned, but Ellie, you're a former student of this head teacher, aren't you? Not at the same school, it has to be said, but I wonder, therefore, your experience, and do you support this policy?
Well, one thing, so he was a headmaster of a different school called Friars School, Ysgol Friars. Ysgol is school in Welsh, which used to be a friary, so that's what it's called, Ysgol Friars. And now he's moved to this other school, and I have to say it's quite funny watching the coverage because no one has named the school, and the reason that no one has named the school is because it's called Ysgol Dyffryn, which I think is really hard for English people to pronounce.
Well, I have to be honest there. I've got the name of the school, and you know, my mum would be furious, and my nana would be telling their grave because they're Welsh, and they'd be furious that I couldn't say it. But I got it, and I thought, oh, I'm just going to casually refer to a school in Wales because I couldn't pronounce it either.
Yeah, I think everybody who's talked about it has done that. Mr. Foden, as I know him, when he was my headmaster at Friars, he was really strict. His nickname was Photo Cop, and he did sort of seem to get a bee in his bonnet about certain things, you know. So I remember the thing when I was at school was children wearing their coats inside. He hated that, and he would sort of punish. It started with lunchtime detentions, and then it went to afternoon detentions, and because some children were still doing it, he then started suspending children just for having their coats inside, which I sort of think is really too far. Really, that's a bit much.
I think it's great. I think it's excellent. I'm with your head teacher there.
Oh well, I mean, he did have a reputation as being a bit of an authoritarian.
And what do you think to this specific thing, what he's doing now? £1,800 outstanding on this school kind of system for paying for your lunches. He's had enough of it, no food until these debts are cleared. What's your thoughts on that?
I think I don't agree with it at all because I think that children need to be fed. I mean, that's pretty, you know, we need to feed children. I think that's sort of the basic principle that we should lead with is that children
need to
be
feed
fed.
children?
We, as a society, you know, we are the 6th richest country in the world. So when our children aren't being fed, that's a political problem. It's not a problem of resources. And it is true to say, you know, so the NEU, the Teachers Union, supports the think tank that I run, Class. So when I talk to them about this stuff, and it is true to say that a lot of teachers are, particularly during the pandemic, you know, when it's been a time of real hardship for some families, a lot of teachers do have to sort of bring in food for the children. So sometimes, you know, lunches, and the part of Wales where this school is, where I come from, does have a lot of deprivation. And, you know, so this might be the only hot meal a child gets in a day.
Because those people, if you're that deprived and you're in that level, what you're talking about, you'll be on free school meals. So this won't apply to you. If you're on free school meals, you're not racking up a debt. This is the people that are not eligible for free school meals, that are supposed to be paying for their lunches and are not paying for their lunches.
Well, I think, there's people who are just over the line, aren't there? And they're also in quite a difficult position, particularly during the pandemic. So I don't think that we should say, well, you can afford it, so you should pay it, without actually understanding what's going on in those children's lives. But I think I should also say this, which is that, the schools have been cut to the bone over the last 10 years, and so have local authorities. So really what we need to do is actually fund schools and fund our local authorities so that they don't have to even think about things like this.
Miata, what's your view?
Yeah, this does make me really cross, because I don't think you can be serious about educating kids and think it's okay for kids to go hungry. The idea that you wouldn't feed kids, and then, by the way, they just don't learn, just seems completely bizarre to me. And I do go back to the fact that actually I would be giving all kids, I'm from old school, I remember when kids were given lunch, and it was just part of your education, I would give all kids lunch. And I think it is a collective responsibility. I think it should be funded properly by the state, because in the end, if we have kids that are all going through, and you know that they have that meal, they can progress in school in a way that they can't. When you have that sort of differentiation between families that can afford to feed their kids and families that can't. So I'm all about, it is a collective responsibility. I have sympathy for schools because schools are struggling, but the buck stops with us and us making a collective decision that this is something that we should do for our kids.
Benedict.
Ooh. I think it's we can all agree that children need to eat. I think that that's something that, there can be no sort of discussion. That's a basic biological function. Having just discussed the furlough issue, where, you have a situation where lots of people need help, and then you have a few who actually don't need help but decide that they're going to take advantage of the system anyway. We don't necessarily know enough about this case to pass judgment on it. It might be that, as you say, parts of North Wales, there's terrible sort of deprivation. A lot of people might need, intervention from the state, but there may also be people, and, the story does actually say it's a handful of people. It's not, that lots and lots of children aren't doing it. It's that it's a small group of repeat offenders. It might be that their parents are unable to provide them with lunch, or it might be that their parents just don't prioritise that. And, that nobody ever wants to sort of cast aspersions about a parent's priorities, but that does exist, that does happen, and we would be foolish actually pretend that it doesn't. I think that we can't necessarily pass judgment without knowing that. And if that is the case, then I don't think that that's necessarily unfair to say to some parents, actually, you need to be prioritising these things because this is your children's lives that we're talking about. And, absolutely. Not being able to eat, not having enough food does affect children's education, massive detriment to them. But ultimately, that sometimes you do just have to have that little bit of tough love with some parents and say, well, actually, are you going to be serious about this, or are you just going to assume that somebody else is going to take care of your children? And sometimes you do need a disciplinarian in schools to actually, get it into people's heads that life isn't there just to hand them everything, because you're doing your children a disservice if actually that is what they're brought up to believe.
Well, I think I'm going to be the nasty one then on the panel, because my view on this topic, and I do agree that we kind of need a bit more detail on it, but it goes without saying, at least it should go without saying, that no child should go hungry. Absolutely do not want that. But we have a welfare state that should take care of that. So if you're in that situation, you genuinely can't afford to feed your child, there's a welfare state which includes, in this instance at school, free school lunches. So those people will hopefully be taken care of. When you're in a situation when you can afford to pay for your lunch, you should absolutely be paying for your lunch. I used to volunteer at a homeless shelter, and we used to provide lunches, and we used to have a policy where we charged £1 for lunch. So if you come to, it was homeless and vulnerable shelter, and everyone that chose to come to this shelter or needed to come to the shelter had to pay £1 for this lunch. The reason that we did this was so that it was valued. There was a value put on the service that we're providing, the food that we gave to these people, and it was almost as well to teach a basic exchange for something. And I think in this dynamic, if you want to have a hot meal at school, you don't have to. You can take a packed lunch if you want to take a packed lunch. If you choose to have a hot meal and you're able to pay, which I'm assuming you are, or else you'd be under the catch-all of the free school meals, then you have to pay for the food that you eat. You won't go rocking to Asda or Tesco and just take your food and wander off and not pay for it. So why should you do that at school?
Well, so I think the challenge is that because we've squeezed the welfare system so much, actually, it is the means-tested system means that it's the poorest kids that are getting free school meal, and there'll be many families who are just about managing, have a really hard couple of months, and that's it, they're below the line, but the system doesn't necessarily catch you.
But then why wouldn't you send a packed lunch then? This is what I don't
You
get.
can't afford that either, though.
A pack lunch, you've got about £1 for a loaf of bread, there or thereabouts. Don't all get in touch telling me they're £1.20 or whatever. But £1 for, I'll tell you how we did it, because we was a poor family with 6 children. We used to have, and I don't even know if they still do it anymore, a thing called sandwich spread. So we used to get a jar of sandwich spread, a loaf of bread, and that's what we used to eat, sandwich spread sandwiches. And this whole kind of concept, when you become a parent, I'm a new parent, my child comes before everything for me, everything. I would go hungry to make sure that my child eats.
These parents aren't starving their children. They're trying to balance a lot of their finances, maybe so that they can pay for other things for their children, like clothes or heating or food at home. And as part of that balancing, I expect some of them will have just said, OK, I'm going to put off that for a while because, you know, I can, and maybe I'll get some more money down the pipe. They're not actually not feeding their children. They're just trying to put off the payment for whatever reason. We don't know why that is, but I don't think it's that outlandish to think that some of them are just trying to sort of balance their finances overall so that they can keep paying their mortgages or their rent and their heating bills and that kind of thing.
Yeah, one of the things that does concern me, to be fair to this, because I would hope that if you are this head teacher and you're in this scenario where your kids are not paying the bills, fair step would be, I would hope, that you sit down and you try and work out why you're not paying the bills. That would be your first step. And I would hope that by the time you've got to this point of your letters that you've done all that. But one of the parents has said if they actually let you pay your £1.60 bill without having to pay a minimum payment of £10, that would be a help. And I completely agree with that parent. So if you're gonna tell people to clear their debts, you've got to be sensible with the measures that you expect them to do it in. If you've got a debt of £100, it's unfair to expect the whole £100 to be paid without some kind of payment plan. So one would hope that has already been thought through and put in place. You guys have been getting in touch. That Gareth says school dinner should be free for every primary school teacher. To make a child feel humiliated by not having enough money by, say, 1p is total humiliation to what is already a vulnerable child who would be scarred for life by that experience. Gareth goes on to say that headmaster needs sacking, and I'm ashamed to be Welsh.
Don't say that, Gareth. There's nothing should make you ashamed to be Welsh.
Someone else who's anonymous says, read the school meals. I agree with the head teacher. The parents should keep on top of this and they should focus on ensuring that their kids' meals are paid for on time. They have the responsibility. Rax again on Twitter says that parents should feed their children, and if you can't feed your children, you shouldn't have children. The only thing I'd say to that, Rax, to be fair to some parents, is circumstances do also change. Sometimes you can financially plan that you're okay and have a child, and then who knows what could happen in your life. Things change, don't they? And so we go on. Reg says it's not the child's fault that the parents haven't paid the school meal fee, so it shouldn't be taken out on the children. They go on to say that the head teacher needs to find some other way to penalise the parents. Shane is not messing around. He says, do me a favour. Why should I pay for other people's kids when I already pay for mine? He goes on to say it's a freeloader society. That's Shane's point of view. Chi-Ho Wang has said, I believe that the headmaster is doing the right thing. There you go. Well, keep your thoughts coming in. Going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be looking at whether or not firms should be able to use artificial technology to track their staff. Apparently, it's not good for employees' mental health. We'll have that and more after the break.
Coming up Thursday on Dan Wootton Tonight, after Meghan and Harry's hypocrisy and disinformation campaign was exposed in court, the Duchess's distraught dad, Thomas Markle, weighs in on the bombshell revelations. Plus, US broadcasting icon Megyn Kelly breaks down some of the biggest stories across the Atlantic and gives a stateside view on the week's homegrown headlines. That's Dan Wootton Tonight from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Monday to Thursday on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello, welcome back. Now, a group of MPs and peers have said that setting performance targets through algorithms is damaging to an employee's mental health and needs to be controlled by new laws. They've done a report and it basically recommends bringing in what they're calling a new algorithm act, which would establish a clear direction to ensure AI, artificial intelligence, puts people first. And under the act, workers would be given the right to be involved in the design and the use of these systems where computers are executing decisions on important aspects of someone's work, such as allocation of shifts and pay, and whether maybe even someone gets a job in the first place. So what do we think to this? Artificial intelligence, apparently it's the future. Should it be used, Miata, to track, incentivise, motivate, some might say, employees?
So I don't think it does incentivise or motivate employees. Good on these MPs for raising this as an issue, because I think the surveillance culture that we're seeing, particularly in some sectors, we've seen it in the gig economy, we've seen it in the kind of delivery sector, is really insidious. It's really insidious, it's really dangerous, and it essentially forces people to kind of work to the bone to keep up with targets that are just not realistic. And at the end of the day, you know, if you want to motivate people, if you want to incentivize them, you get them being engaged in their work, you reward them well, you train them, you look after them. That's how we deliver that. We don't do it by setting crazy targets by an algorithm that has no connection to the reality of doing the job and is really oppressive. And I'd use the language oppressive deliberately.
Would you? Ellie, what do you share that? Is it oppressive?
Yes, I think it is. I class my think tank is supported by GMB Union, which is the union that has struck a deal with Uber to represent Uber drivers. And so I had a meeting with GMB just last week where we talked about the experiences of Uber drivers, and they'll sometimes drive too fast or drive through red lights because they're so worried. That's what it says in the article as well, about sort of meeting targets or getting a certain rating. They get thrown off the app without any explanation sometimes and don't have any recourse. There's no sort of HR department, so they don't, they're not really managed. They don't really have any way to sort of complain. So it can be very, very alienating and desperately unfair. And, as Miata says, the margins are so tight of what they have to do that really it doesn't take much for people to be losing more in spending, money on petrol on the car than they're making. And I think one criticism that I would make of, I do agree, good on the MPs, is that they really need to make sure that they work with these trade unions when they're looking at this kind of thing, because the trade unions have a direct line to these workers who are doing this kind of work. And so actually the policies that can be put forward if you speak to trade unions will come directly from people's working experience. And final shameless plug is that we have a report coming out which touches on a lot of this in January next year.
Right, well, there you go. Bedtime reading in January. I look forward to that. Benedict, your thoughts?
I'm going to look at this from the slightly capitalist and elitist perspective, and that is that AI will make the managerial class lazy, because what it is it's outsourcing the job of managers to a computer. And I don't think we want that. I think actually we want a lot more sort of interpersonal relations. We want, ultimately I think you want your boss to be, not necessarily a friend, but at least at the very least somebody who you can speak to, who you can sort of empathise with you. And, especially if we are, as is being suggested, we're all going to be moving to a system where more people are working from home. So there's going to be a lot more of a sort of a reliance on technology. Anyway, I think in keeping the personal is very important in terms of hierarchies, in terms of structures. It makes people more incentivized in terms of climbing corporate ladders, in terms of, trying new things, perhaps, sort of brainstorming, trying to be a little bit different. Whereas AI can't necessarily do that. It has a certain set of parameters that it can work within. And, ultimately, I don't think it's too churlish to say that, it will just create a sort of a management class that just rests on its laurels and relies on what the technology tells it to do, and, can plausibly sit there and go, oh, well, I'm sorry that XYZ happened, but this is what the algorithm says, and this is what we're going to go with because it's company policy. I don't think that that's particularly business savvy. I think it sounds good. It sounds like the future. It sounds very sort of efficient. But in reality, I think a lot of mistakes will end up being made in a lot of businesses if this is what we revert to. And of course, there is the fact that if we are going to be all working from home, this is incredibly invasive into people's personal lives. You already have the issue of the separation between what should be your office space and what should be your home space. I don't think we need anything more than we already have, frankly, invading people's private space if they are working from home, for example.
Yeah, and I do think the world of work, I mean, Ellie, when you're talking about things like Uber and stuff like that, I think that the whole world of work has kind of been thrown up in the air. And I find it fascinating, actually. It'll be interesting to see what happens over the months, maybe years ahead, because things that were traditionally quite low paid and all the rest of it, what you're seeing now, because there's been a reduction in labour that's been available to that person, that organisation or that kind of sector, you're now seeing wage hikes. And I think that we're going to see a bit of a shift in terms of where the dynamic between how important the employees used to be and how replaceable an employee used to be to the employer, and vice versa, because I think that you're going to see a scenario where your labour force has a lot more choice as to where do I want to work. Are they treating me the way that I feel like I ought to be treated? Are they paying me the way that I ought to be paid? And I think that it will be really interesting to see how that all pans out. Trevor has been in touch saying the day that my employer tells me that they're going to track me with algorithms will be the day I tell them where to stick their job. You proved my point there, Trevor. I think more people will get a little bit more selective going forward in terms of where, when and how they work. We shall see. Anyway, I saw this story earlier on this week. I've been meaning to talk about it for a couple of days now. Never got round to it, must be honest. And tonight is the night because it made me laugh. Oh no, I was just about to say it made me laugh, and then I was going on to say the guy is terminally ill. That bit of the story didn't make me laugh, obviously. What I meant was this man, he's terminally ill, and he's come up with a bucket list. And it was this part of the story that has made me laugh, because on his bucket list, he's looked at all the things that he wants to do before he does sadly reach his end. And on that list was he decided that he wanted to pull a Mooney to a speed camera. There's a speed camera that's quite close to where he lives, I think, and it had caught him a few times, and he had enough, and there it was on his list. You'll be pleased to know I'm not going to be showing you any pictures of this, but down came his pants, up went his bottom, and off the camera went. He ticked it off his bucket list. He was very happy. Daryl Maycomb, he was called. Anyway, he basically went on, I think, to get arrested. He was in Kidderminster. This was on Friday, by the way, and I don't know if anyone's seen the videos, but there's quite a few police, I've got to say, that have been involved in the arresting of him, which I thought was a bit weird. Anyway, other things on his bucket list is a street naked Premiership rugby match. And it got me thinking, bucket lists, what's on them? Does anyone have one? Panel, do you have a bucket list? Is there anything on there that you're wanting to do? I've got to say, I don't, actually. I need to come up with one.
I don't, but I think at the top of my list, having now got 3 kids, which means I never get a holiday, I would just love to go to like a paradise, an island without any children, and just sit and read a book for.
And just have some me time.
Yeah,
that's
all I want. It's very simple.
I like that. I know life gets more simpler. Your needs and wants get simpler the more complex your life gets. What about you, Ellie? Anything that you're itching to do?
Well, now it's watching that guy streak in a rugby game, I think, and I have faith that the GMB News can put GMGB. God, I put GMB Union in my head. GB News viewers can lobby the rugby matches to make sure that happens.
Get him on. Get him on that.
But actually, my answer is a bit corny because I met my Australian husband in 2019 and we got married in 2020. And because of the pandemic, I have actually never met any of his family. So
have you not?
No, so that's the top. Well, I've obviously on Zoom
and stuff,
but yeah, because they live all the way in Australia. So
to meet your in-laws.
Yeah, that's the top of my
That's
bucket
quite
list.
unique because a lot of people want to get away from their in-laws.
I know. I'm very blessed. I've got great in-laws. So,
what about you, Benedict?
Yeah.
Anything on yours?
All of mine are going to sound very flippant after that. That's quite a nice thing. I'd like to meet my family. I mean, having suggested that, I'd also quite like to see the day that the GMB and GB News merge. That would be something I want to see on my bucket list. I mean, I could say as a millennial, I'd really like to own a house at some point and eat an avocado guilt-free. That would be really wonderful.
It's got to be realistic.
Yeah, it has to be realistic. Really wild ones, I'd quite like to go skiing in some of the world's most outlandish places that you can ski. North Korea, Iran, Afghanistan, places like that. So something that's never going to happen. I think you have to have a bucket list that is a little bit pie in the sky, so that you aim quite high. Because then, even if you don't achieve it, you fall a little bit higher than you would have done. So that's a bit of a curveball that I don't think anybody else wants to do.
Yeah, see, I don't think I've got. This is going to sound really egotistical, I think, but if I die tomorrow, and I hope I don't, obviously, don't want to tempt fate or anything on the way home, but I think I'd be all right. I've had a really awesome life. I've done loads of stuff, and if I've ever wanted to do anything, I've done it. So I don't actually think that there's anything that I kind of sit here and think, oh yeah, I desperately want to do this or want to go there. Or to your point, though, probably getting away from my kid for a couple of days. No offence to my little boy, but getting away from my kid and having a bit of peace and quiet, that would be quite nice, wouldn't it? Quite frankly.
More people should want to streak at Premiership matches, though, because if nothing else, during very boring games, then you'd see an awful lot of people rushing at once, and it would be quite fun to watch, the limited number of police and steward trying to go, well, which one do we go for first? Do we corner the slower ones? Do we actually try to head off the ringleaders? That could create quite a fun social phenomenon.
I've always found it quite disappointing, though, when there is a streaker and the camera turns away from them.
Well, that's why you need lots, so that there's nowhere that the camera can look.
Give the people what they want.
Yeah,
Let them see the man run naked.
And I want to see the guy get rugby tackled on the floor. That's what I want to see. And I do. They always switch the camera off. I think, what are you doing? Go back to him. I want to see what he's doing. I nearly said something really inappropriate then. I stopped myself. Nim says, on my bucket list, oh, this is a nice one. On my bucket list is to be there when GB News is the top-rated network. We'll make it happen. We'll make it happen.
Is that a producer?
Probably. I wonder if it's my mum. But I don't think it is under a fake name.
Mark Dolan
I don't think it is. Yeah. Stan says, Michelle, I have now adopted Ellie May as my most favourite, sensible and likeable lefty. That's what Stan says.
Well, Stan, meeting you is on my bucket list now.
Oh, there you
Getting
go.
A pint with Stan.
There you go. Well, look at this. Look at the time. It's almost time for us to head off. Another day done. It flies by when you're having fun. Ellie, well, yeah, thank you to you all. I was just about to say thank you just to you, Ellie.
No, it's quite all right.
I was just about to say, Ellie, thank you so much. But thank you to all of you. Miata, Benedict, Ellie, thank you. And thank you as well for your company tonight and for all of your contacts. You're still coming in about the school meals. You're all raving about it. Anyway, that's all from me. I'll see you tomorrow at 6 o'clock till 7 o'clock. In the meantime, have yourself a very good evening.
Evening. A lively Friday ahead tomorrow. Fairly gusty conditions. Most places seeing a few showers. Some places having a pretty soggy day. But some spots seeing a bit of sunshine as well. It's all courtesy of this area of low pressure that's moving in and ousting a little ridge of high pressure. These weather fronts bringing bands of rain overnight and the isobars squidging together, which is why the winds will be steadily picking up for most overnight.
It's still pretty fine out there this evening across much of eastern England, but patchy rain for Wales, some heavy bursts of rain for Scotland and Northern Ireland, and those winds continuing to strengthen. That all adds up to a pretty mild night as well. Early in the evening, we could drop down to single figures across parts of the east, but by dawn, most towns and cities will be at double digits. Most will start grey, though, with outbreaks of rain. Certainly for a good part of Scotland, some heavy rain here. The rain should ease from Northern Ireland, but quite a wet day for parts of northwest England, north and mid Wales. Showers across the south, but a good part of the day here will be dry, and we should see some sunny spells, lifting the temperatures maybe to 15 degrees. Generally 12 to 14, but feeling cooler because it will be quite blustery, quite boisterous, particularly when the showers come along. Plenty more of those showers around through Friday evening as well, but they do gradually tend to fade, so it's turning drier as we head into the weekend. Clearer skies across northern Britain will allow a cooler start to Saturday. Still a bit of a breeze early on. Quite a fresh breeze at times along those North Sea coasts, but generally a much calmer day on Saturday with sunny spells for parts of Scotland, northern England. Further south and west, quite a lot of cloud. Bit of drizzle is possible through parts of Northern Ireland. Temperatures still mostly around or a touch above average, and the winds will be lighter on Saturday, so it'll probably feel a little milder. Mostly light winds on Sunday could allow some fog to form. Fairly cloudy skies, but again, most places will be dry and bright. Goodbye.